A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in for today's webinar. It's a CPD topic. As you all can see, it's on law of expense management. My name is Gayatri, and I would be doing today's webinar here. I'm going to be sharing the links on chat window before we get started. We have a couple of minutes. I'm going to be sharing the attendance links and also the details of today's webinar. Please do watch out for the links every 15 minutes to 20 minutes once. I'm going to try and share the links, if not towards the end of the webinar. Thank you. Let's give it a couple of minutes for more people to join in. I see a lot of them joining in. It'll be helpful for them if we get started. 2 p.m. and the topic for today's session, once again, law of expense management. We're going to be discussing about different types of expenses and how do you handle that from the law office perspective. It's going to be a combination of both disbursements and office expenses. So it's kind of a little vast topic, but we're going to see how we could crack it and make the best use of this 1 hour. If any of you have any audio issues, I request you to dial in by the phone, and that'll be helpful. Am I audible to everyone? Tom, if in case you're not able to hear me well, I suggest you use the phone audio. You just have to click on the audio button on the top and it gives you 2 options, computer and the phone. I request you to use the phone. We will share the details with you for the phone audio. Yeah, thank you. For those of you joining a little late, do not worry. We are recording this session. We are also going to be sharing the link for attendance as well as the topic towards the end of the webinar. So please don't panic in case you're not, able to get the link or get access to the link. Thank you. All right, 2 p.m. bank. Let's get started. For those of you who have attended this session before, I'm sure you would have experienced a little bit of both disbursement management and office expense management. I'm sure you would have learned and enjoyed that part of maintaining your books. Today, we're going to discuss the same. Of course, the law of expense management has nothing more than the office expenses and the client expenses combined and put together. How good can you manage them? How best can you maintain the records? And what are the what are the bookkeeping necessities that you need to keep in mind when you're managing these expenses? So like every other webinar, we do have a set agenda for this webinar, and the agenda is basically knowing the difference between disbursements and office expenses. When you take disbursements by itself is a vast topic, but we are not going to discuss too much into disbursements, as we do have another CPD webinar called Disbursements Demystified, which must be there in the upcoming schedule. But we will still talk about disbursements here and how do you manage disbursement, what are different types of disbursements, how do you record them, how do you sort them, how do you spend on a disbursement, whether it's to be done from trust or general or your personal credit card, and what are law society's expectations when it comes to disbursements. What does it expect from you? How does it expect you to record it? How does it expect you to spend on it? And what are the books that you need to, records that you need to maintain? All of it under disbursements and how to manage them. Likewise, similarly, we're going to discuss business expenses. How do you manage them? What are the types of expenses? Expense report, different heads of expenses that needs to be maintained, everything to be discussed under the business office expenses as well. And we're also going to see what are the different reports that can be generated, keeping in mind expense books and disbursement ledgers, journals, and other analytics that we can go through. That's about today's agenda. Quickly jumping into the first part of our webinar. I would like to term it as part 1, part 2. Part 1 being disbursements, part 2 being office expenses. This is what we're going to discuss today. And being disbursements, disbursements are very simple, but a lot of us, kind of, I won't say mess it up, but a lot of us shy away from charging clients for disbursement and end up adding as a legal fee or different types of expenses that they would add it as. But disbursement is a very straightforward, expense that you incur on behalf of your client, where all the expenses that you have incurred during the time you're servicing them is called as disbursement and is to be recorded under your books, saying that it was expense incurred on behalf of your client and that it would be reimbursed by them while they are paying for your services too. But making sure that you are adding disbursements separately, not as part of your legal fee, is the most important point that one needs to keep in mind. Just to save time or to, not complicate your invoice, some people just merge both and sometimes invoice the client as one single payment. But I would always recommend you to keep in mind that please try to add your expenses incurred on behalf of your client as a disbursement, so that any expenses that you have made, you are able to recollect, you're able to get reimbursed, and most importantly, it does not get added to your profit, because obviously it's not your income, it is a reimbursement. So keeping that in mind, you need to record it in the books to balance the accounts whenever you spend, invoice it, and recover the expense. Now, there are different types of disbursement, and there are different types of accounts that you can spend them from. I'll come back to what is business expense and difference between both business expense and disbursement. But at this moment, I want to just continue talking about disbursements just so that I don't confuse you. Now, looking into what are the different types of disbursement, how can you pay for it? Now, there are only 2 bank accounts mostly for a business. One is trust, one is general. When I mean general, it also includes your credit card or your own pocket, everything. Now, anything that you are making as a payment without a profit motive, without a markup value, without any difference in the cost of what you have spent, that can be made directly out of your trust. For example, you're paying a court fee and you're charging your client for the same amount that you have spent. This is nothing but a court fee or a filing fee, which can be directly paid from the trust. It doesn't have to be paid out of general or your credit card. Now, when you pay it out of trust, there is also a part where you can recover the expense. When you pay it out of the trust, there is no need to be worrying about recovering it from the client, because obviously the trust carries your client's money, which is paid out of the trust, and you are not, requiring to ask your client to pay the money back to you. There's no reimbursement involved in here, as you're only using their money after all, and all that you need to show is an expense report from the trust. At the end of the day, the hassle of building records or books of accounts, keeping all of them in mind, is definitely reduced. So if you have a chance to make a payment out of trust, keep that in mind. It should not be of any marked up value, no profit margin involved, and that you're paying any kind of fee or any kind of court filing fee or court fee, any other fees that are directly paid out of trust. So simple that if it is paid out of trust, it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't rather be a marked up value. Now, when you move on to paying a disbursement out of the general credit card or own pocket, it can definitely be marked up. There can be a profit motive involved. There can be a point where the expense can be made from the bank and you're getting prepaid or reimbursed out of your client, and it gets moved from your bank to your credit card because ultimately you've used your personal credit card or your official credit card. But end of the day, the disbursement, however it was paid, gets reimbursed, and all these are later on recorded as an expense in the specific date, in the specific account, with the amount and the method of payment, and under the respective matter and the client, because you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to make sure, you just want to make sure that it's under the right client and the matter, and how the disbursement was paid for, whether it was paid from the bank or credit card or own pocket. Everything is entered in here. And paying from general, yes, it is a little, I would say, a tedious process of collecting back the money. If the client has money sitting in trust, then you move the money from trust to the general by invoicing and paying back yourself later on. But there are a few steps involved. Or if there's no trust concept involved in here, your client pays you directly into the general and you pay yourself if you've paid from the personal pocket. Now, if this disbursement is to be recovered, what needs to be done? Now, what are the things and how should you do it? Making sure that before you raise an invoice, you have recorded the disbursement under the disbursement field, ensuring that all the data is absolutely matching with the records. Could be the date or the amount or the method of payment, whether there's a markup value involved or not, markup marked on, whichever, and whether there's any taxes inclusive or not. And all of these are to be verified before raising an invoice. Now, once you've verified all of this, please make sure you're raising the invoice and getting paid either via trust or directly into the general account as a client payment. Now, if it is obviously paid by your own personal money, which, let's say you used your credit card, or let's say you used your own pocket, then you have to make sure that you're adding in all of those information, such as your personal account details. So whenever you're paying yourself, you have to enter the details of your personal credit card, or move the money, make a bank transfer from your general account to your personal credit card or your personal bank account. So that way you're ensuring all your ledgers and journals are up to date and as per the Law Society guidelines too. Now, about the types of disbursements. The disbursements are basically uh, made out of both trust and general, just as we spoke. Some of them are made out of trust and general. Some of them are made out of only general account, cannot be made out of trust. And let's just take a look at what are those. So first thing first, if it's a billable, you can use both trust and general. Again, if it's any recovery of expenses on actuals, you can use both trust and general. Recovery of expenses with profit margin, always only your general account. Any unit rate, any mileages, any travel time, only general. Any outsourced consultancy with profit margin, only general. So keeping in mind that billable and recovery of expenses on actuals and outsourced consultancy on actuals, all of these are by both trust and general. You can use whatever you have. Not everyone has a trust account. Some of you might have only general account. So you could use general for any disbursement. There is no restriction, whereas you can use trust only on actuals and without any profit margin and billables, etc. Now, keeping that in mind, when you are working on disbursements, make sure all of those journals and ledgers are reviewed from time to time. Fee books with appropriate taxes are captured. The following samples that you see here shows all the ledgers and journals. Right. If you look at the ledgers, it shows you both inward money and outward money, that is both receipts and disbursements, because ledger shows both transactions, inward and outward. Whereas if you take journal, it will show you just the receipt journal, means the amount that you have collected into the trust or the general. And disbursement journal obviously will show you the disbursements. And if you look at the fee book, they give you much more details as to the invoice number and fee collected, or rather fee billed, and HST and the total bill, etc. Keeping that in mind, make sure that your disbursements are updated from time to time, and ensure that they are added as disbursements and not as office expenses, or not as added into your legal fee to collect money, but make sure that they're added as disbursements as it is. Just to ensure that your disbursements are not mismatching with the profit, keeping that in mind. Any disbursement with profit margin, always stick to general. Anything that does not have profit margin and you do have a trust account, and the trust account, the client has paid into the trust account and has money, then you could use the trust account to directly pay for a disbursement. These are some key points that I would say keep in mind when you're working on a disbursement. About office expenses. Now, office expenses, you can call it as business or office expenses. Now, under expense management, there could be only two types of expenses. Rather, one is disbursement expenses incurred on behalf of the client. Another one is business or office expenses. That is, if you have to run a business or an office, you would obviously incur expenses, and any expense incurred for running your office or business is termed as business or office expenses. And you need to record these in the books to balance the accounts and make sure that, only if you claim for expenses, your taxes can be reduced and can be managed, else you'll be showing more profit. Now, if you look at office expenses, now every office or every practice differs with the type of office expenses. Now, one might have a virtual office, one might have an actual office. You might incur rent, or there would be any of these expenses such as rent, utilities. That could also include your internet bills, phone bills, your printer charges. There's so many that you can keep adding on to your office expenses. Making sure that you are paying out such money to run the business, and all the details such as, or rather all the expenses and amounts that a business might have to pay out overall to run a business needs to be managed and entered under the respective heads. If you specifically ask me, uLaw allows you to create different heads under the chart of accounts, and please make sure that you utilize that option to add in all the office expenses, and sometimes even to pay yourself salary or drawings, any bank charges, and any interest on borrowings. Everything comes under the respective expenses account or expense head. And most of the time, we all just close our eye and add it under the expense. It's all office expense. But if you ask me specifically, classifying them under the respective heads brings more meaning and value to it, and you're able to record them and compare the expense on the trend as to how it's going on year-wise. And, you're able to capture those information with more meaning. And let's say whether it's the date or the amount or the type, which is, type of expense, whether it's a phone expense or an internet expense or taxes that you've paid or rent. So you're able to classify them under the respective head. So when you know that when you're comparing your expense chart or different expense category under the chart, you're able to arrive at how much you have paid in the previous years versus the current year. Now, this would only help you to enable the better health of your firm and analyze more as to how much you've spent in the previous year, and make sure that the current year and the upcoming year you're able to follow the same. Now, you can obviously record these individually, or I would say manually, by typing them into under office expenses. You could also do a bank import, right, which is just the statement. Or you could also import them by connecting your bank. Now, what are the different types of documents that you got to maintain, or rather can be maintained when you are working on office expenses? Number one, definitely is expense book. Expense book shows you different categories and different types of expenses with all the information as to whether it was against an invoice or if it was an office expenses, whether it has taxes involved or whether it's tax exempt, and all such things. So you have an expense book. There is also HST, GST, or PST payable statement that shows you all the expenses. There's also expense statement, profit and loss, and borrowing reports, all of these showing the office expenses or any expenses for that reason under uLaw or any other software that you're using. So technically these are available under uLaw, but I'm not sure about other softwares. But you need to make sure that these documents are available under the program that you're using. So making sure that you're able to do also the expense analytics. This is what I was just talking about. when you have different expenses entered under the different heads, you're able to compare and do the ratio analysis, and you're also able to understand the health of business, where you could reduce or appropriately increase, optimize the expenses, and you could use different visual data that you want to use in form of pie charts or table diagrams that you can, and get to know all your unknown facts, because most of the times we are very keen on the docketing and invoicing part, but we all rather, some of us at least, fail to do this exercise, which I really would recommend you to do in your free time. Try to download these analytics and go through them. So, somewhere you will be able to understand how much you're spending on these avenues or areas, and you'll be able to probably, react better to it, make a better plan, and also ensure that you're able to take necessary measurements or steps to control them. Now, if you ask me what is the benefit of using a legal software, legal accounting software, from a perspective of disbursements and expenses, you get to, first of all, record the events as and when they happen. Like in today's world, you can use mobile apps, you can use your browser, you can just come in here and do it anytime. Record events as and when they occur. You don't even have to record, you can just have to click on Connect Bank, and it will show you all the expenses that has incurred, or rather that was incurred this month or this week. And you're also able to record the financial data, as soon as possible. You would be able to do the reconciliation. So let's say this is a place where you get to do both together, where you record the transactions and you also reconcile them at the same time. And you're also able to maintain all of these on software. There's no need for any documentation. There's no need for any paper pen method here. Everything is based on the workflow. You're just in the workflow where all your documents are part of the software, and you're able to take action as you keep proceeding. And last but not the least, these are all because you have an accounting software. Saves you all the time because there's so much of ease in use. They are handy to use, so you save time. There's all the analytics that you could do, so it also gives you a different perspective to the whole lot of picture here. And accountability as well as compliances are taken care of, which is my major concern, if you ask me. If I am able to take care of the accountability to my client, give them the details on the paper, and I'm able to make sure that I'm compliant with the law society, then this, obviously there's nothing more than that. So keeping in mind that recording expenses under the respective heads, or making sure that you record them under the disbursements or office expenses, raising invoices if it's a disbursement on or before time, and getting yourself paid, whether it's directly from the client into trust or directly from client into general, is very important. And also that whether it's profit margin involved or not, deciding between actuals and profit margin, and whether they can be paid from trust or general, and all of verifying all the journals and ledgers, and ensuring that all of these are updated from time to time, very, very important. These are some exercises that would help you to be on top of your data. However, quick question here, a question for after. That's okay. I can take a quick break here. I'm going to walk you all through it. How do we print our fee book and required books when required to by auditor? Yeah, so fee book, if you're a uLaw user, is available under accounts, document generation, and you see fee book at the bottom. It's accounts, document generation, and fee book. For those of you who joined in late, I'm going to add the attendance link here once again with the session details. The topic for today's session is Law Office Expense Management. We're talking about how you can manage the office expenses as well as your disbursements, keeping in mind the Law Society compliances and documents that needs to be generated. Now what I'm going to do is I have about 30 minutes here. I would like to walk you all through my uLaw account. It's a playground account, and I'm going to walk you through probably a couple of disbursements and office expenses, and also generating a few reports from it. So any questions, probably would encourage you to use the chat window to enter all your questions. I would definitely look into it when I take a break or when I'm there at the end of the webinar. As you all know that uLaw is a cloud-based practice management. We are using it on the web browser currently. So it's updated from time to time. So you can see that, let's say there's a client contact, you take anything that you want, anyone here. So let's say I can click on one of these matters. There's already a few dockets in there, a few disbursements, and some client payments. I'm going to create a few disbursements here to show you all how disbursements work. Let's say there was some money from the trust account. So I'm going to go into trust and deposit a new retainer that the client gave. Enter the information. You can always give them a receipt and click apply. You can also give your client a receipt. Go back in there. Now go to disbursements. Let's say you like to add a new disbursement. Now there are two heads here, two subheadings that you can see. Number one is you withdraw from trust. And the number two is withdraw from general, cash, or any other account. Now, let's say we're going to do both. Let me first look into paid from trust. You've paid from trust, code filing fee for $200 using a check. Check number is here. Paid to you can also print the check from uLaw. Click on payments. So you can download a check and print the check later. Now you click on add new disbursement. Let's say this time it was paid from the general account. These are not actuals. What I did earlier was actual. So there was no top and bottom portion. If you could clearly probably I'll reopen that to show you all. There was no top and bottom portion. It was just one single portion because there's no difference in the amount of what you're charging your client versus what was charged to you, which means what was paid. So there's no difference between, there's no need to differentiate between the expended amount and charging your client, right? So you're going to be now showing how you paid from the general. Let's say this time it was photocopies and you're charging your client for $20 plus taxes. However, at the bottom, you're leaving it empty. First of all, there are two divisions here, two portions, one on the top, one on the bottom. The top portion is what is called as, or rather the top portion is what you're charging your client. Now, this is what exactly you're charging them for, along with your legal fee from the matter events page. And report expenses, what you have expended for on behalf of your client. So if you have really spent for this photocopies and you paid some different amount, you can always enter it at the bottom. This is the place where you enter what you have spent. You're reporting the expense into your books of account. Right now over here, I'm leaving the bottom portion blank because I used my office printer to make photocopies. Just click on save and you should be able to see the expense here, but there's nothing gone out of your bank account. The next time you're using mileages, you had a simple client visit. You enter all the information. Charged, you probably marked down and charged your client a different amount, but you spent a little bit more. And you can enter all the details as to how you paid, who you paid, any method of payment, any numbers that you can verify it with, and select the bank and click save. So you have other disbursements too that can be added from here. Once all the disbursements are added, you can click on invoice, pre-bill, and raise an invoice. If you do not have any dockets, then you can do only disbursements. There you go. So we made overall of 3 disbursements. Number 1 was from the trust account. If you go into the next page, you would see that payout of trust, code fee, $200. Then you had the photocopies and mileage for client visit. So when you go into your accounts and download the compliance for monthly compliance, you want to do a general disbursement journal entry just for today and download, you would see the 3 transactions in there. Sorry, 1, because one of them was from trust. Another one, we did not even report the expense. So this one went out of it. You have covered method of payment, who was paid to, and description with the taxes. And go back in there. Let's say you want to do expense book. Now this should show the transaction as to what was made under the expense book too. Very similar to general disbursement. If I do clients trust payments or clients in general here, you would now see, give me one moment, let me show you. Clients general, today's date. Yeah, this would show you the 2 transactions. If you go in and click on client's trust, it will show you one of the transactions that you made today for the $200. There you go. Now, when you look at these documents here, it very clearly tells you the details such as even the check number, what was the description for code fee, and the client's matter title, name, what was it, other payout, the amount, the date. So these are pretty important, especially when you're capturing them. Make sure that you're adding them all. That way you have all the information handy when you're trying to run the reports. Go back in there. Let's do a fee book. Compliance. Here's a fee book. So you can get it from the compliance as well as document generation download. I'll show you the fee that you're charging them, fee or disbursements, whatever. Again, tells you whether it's a legal fee or a disbursement very clearly. What is the disbursement? Whether it's photocopies or, client's visit. The fee, taxes, and the total. Everything is entered in here with the date and the client's details. Along with that, let's do one more thing. Let's say if you go and add office expenses part. That's about the disbursements, but when I'm looking at the office expenses, there are 3 ways we could add it. Number 1, manually add office expenses. Let's say I'm doing rent. Okay, pre-taxes. Who was paid to, how was paid, check. And similarly, you're looking at office expenses to be imported. You just choose your file. You have to use a CSV file. You can just choose your file and then just open it under that, and you should be able to add in all your expenses easily. Make sure that it's in the CSV format, and once you're able to add them, you can just simply add it in there. Just click in here. Load it. There you go. So you can just click on take action. Was paid as an office expense. Was paid as, maybe rent. Okay. Submit it. Just have to keep taking action. Office expenses. Office supplies this time. Maybe printer. Paid it to Staples with the credit card. The transaction number goes under the respective account, bank account, and submit it. So import bank statements, another option. Now the other option is to connect your bank making sure all your banks are connected, and click on Connect Bank. I think today my bank is not connected, but yeah, if you're connecting the bank and click on Connect Bank, same way that how you imported the bank statement and had to take action is how this is done too. Additionally, you can also view your bank statement. Let me draw the expense book and show you once again here with all the data. Okay. Anything with expense portion over here, you get to see here. So it's not showing maybe the rent that I just added because I clicked on the date range today, but I added rent on 1st of April. So let me do monthly. Now you should be able to see the rent also over here. Yeah, there you go. So it captures the information so appropriately that, it fits into the respective headers, and all that you have to do is sit on the pie charts and analyze what was the rent the previous quarter was versus what was it the current one, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much that could make a difference with you reviewing those accounts, and this is one of them. And there you go. For those of you who joined late, once again, sharing the attendance links, please do enter your attendance, enter your details so that in future, if we have to even look back to give you information that you have attended this session, will be helpful. And the topic for today's session is also entered in there. It's a 1 hour of CPD session. It's professionalism CPD credits. The topic for today's session is law of expense management. And so far we've discussed as to, how one could be recording the expenses and differentiating them between office expenses and client expenses, and when to use trust, when not to use trust, and what are the types of expenses that can be recorded under office expenses, what are the types of expenses that can be recorded under client expenses, and how can you manage them better. All this was discussed, and we've also seen a couple of transactions as to how it can be recorded in uLaw, and looking into it a little deeper to show you how the analytics portion works. When you click on analytics in uLaw, now you could have up to 6 widgets. Now I have only 4. Let me show you how the expense portion works. I want to choose all the expense parts today. So let's do expense uLaw Insights, expense book uLaw Insights, expense charts by category, and then expense charts by clients, right? So let's do monthly and click go. Monthly. Let's see how things looks like. There's no expense chart by clients. Yeah, there you go. So everything entered in here. This is the best part. Now you could go over by clicking on just simply go, or you can click on details and look into it in detail. And there is also this where you could expand and just look into the details over there. We can also look at the table or bar or pie chart. You can just, make changes respectively. I have a couple of interesting questions that I'd like to take. What is the best way to access expenses when filing taxes? Is analytics best for this? Analytics is definitely best for only your internal review. When you're filing taxes, I would say go into accounts and go to document generation, go to reports. At the bottom, you have balance sheet, trial balance, revenue. There's something called expense in detail. So this will give you a report. I think we already did this expense book a little earlier, but there's also something called expense statement. This gives you the category, the type of expense, the expense account name with the amount, and what is the total and subtotal, etc. So if you're filing taxes, I would highly recommend you to go into accounts, document generation, expense, and look into the detail or date range. Another question. Can you show me how I can find out how much payroll tax needs to be sent to CRA? So sorry, this is a little specific question, and it's a little time consuming. If you could reach out to us on support@uLawPractice.com or give us your email ID, we would make sure to reach out to you today right after the webinar and help you with this. But to keep it in a nutshell, you can just make sure that you can go into your trial balance and review it. Or the best way to do that is also go into chart of accounts, liabilities, and you can know payroll, and you can look at all of your payables, which is what probably you have to pay into as part of the government, contributions. So make sure, all the payables are under payroll. You have pension payable or the payroll deductions. Just go through them and you can collect, in case if you're looking to do payroll taxes also, you can go into payroll taxes account and review it. Awesome. Right, almost to the fag end of today's session. Any questions, you're welcome to enter them on the chat window. I'm happy to take more questions. In the meantime, whatever we've done today, including the analytics portion, analytics, by the way, one thing I would like to recommend all of you to do, if you're a uLaw user, please download the mobile app. The mobile app allows you to do all of this sitting anywhere in this world. You don't have to be in front of your desktop or your laptop or your system, nothing required. Just your phone and you in maybe a mug with coffee or tea. Try to unwind yourself looking into these analytics. That's a different type of relaxation game that I would say altogether, but try to look into this piece of information and clarify everything that you are in doubt with. Make talks with these pie chart diagrams. They talk back to you, honestly. If you look at them, they might keep moving and keep showing you all the information in their own language. So if you are a very interested person with your firm's help, I would highly recommend you to use the analytics tab, whether you're in the browser or in your mobile app. Try to utilize one of them and make the best use of the resources that's available to you. And besides that, entering the data from the matter for your client disbursements is another thing that I always recommend my clients to do. Now, yes, of course, if you're using an import bank statement option or a bank connect, you can still simply click on take action client expense and it will again take you back and lead to your client's matter. But if you are doing it manually and you know it is a disbursement, always go into the matter, go into the disbursements tab, add new disbursements, and go from there. Because this way it is very less chance that you might make an error or a mistake. And it's always highly recommended that you go into the matter and client to add in all the information respectively. Any questions, anyone? I'm going to be here for some more time. I'm going to be able to add more questions in case answer is required. Just give me 1 second. I think, yeah, let's ask for the link. Let me share the link information here once again. There are more useful links that I would be sharing soon with all of you. So I request everyone to stay back to make notes of the links or the details. The attendance link, please do not miss to provide your attendance. Once again, thank you all for joining today's topic on law office expense management. If you have not been using uLaw, please do register for the 14-day free trial. If you or your friend are interested, we would be happy to schedule demos. There would be more information on not just these topics, more topics that are relevant, that are law society compliant topics that are more in details that can be discussed. And these topics helps you to be compliant at the same time, service your client with more dignity and more of, your compliant nature, and also keeping in mind all of these information can be entered in less than no time than, doing things manually and time consuming. So if you are also managing your accounts yourself, I would highly recommend this app, where you can just do everything on your own, right from adding client to the matter to doing the dockets, the disbursements under the respective disbursements tab, and then doing your accounts. And most important of all, the compliance, very straightforward and single click under the downloads. Just have to click on it and you should be able to see them. No, we don't do substantiative hours, Jamie. We do only 1 hour of professionals and CPD credits. uLaw always gives only professionals and CPD credits. Just FYI for your future, 1 hour of professionals and CPD credits. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Once again, I thank each and every one of you for joining today's session. It's a wonderful topic. I hope everyone benefited from it. If you're someone who's looking for more information on this, feel free to ping us on our live chats or reach out to us on support@uLawPractice.com, or feel free to also reach out to us on our website. Thank you. For the benefit of all, I'd like to stop the recording here. I would still hang in here for another 5 minutes, and I'd like to take any questions any one of you have regarding this topic. Law Office Expense Management. It's 1 hour of CPD. I have posted the link here on the chat window a few times, and I would be doing it another time. For those of you who have joined late, please make the best use of it. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and a nice weekend too.